Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Company on Power Talk, thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, it's an honor to bring in somebody who has been holding it down, keeping the time, breaking up time and form, leaving the head of the tune, coming back into the tune, coming back on the one, learning to paint with all of his peers, learning under his elders, and always trying to inspire. And I often wondered on my journey why I kept doing what I was doing, because it was against everything that society says is logical, but nobody could have ever foreseen what we are now presented with as a civilization. And musicians are very much in the same mode of life and death. And at this point, my guest continues to stay on the righteous path, hone his craft, and be on the bandstand when possible. Bill Huntington, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
Can you talk about the first time you got hip to, we just lost him last week. I don't know if you know this, but the two bassists I wanted you to ask about, because they really fundamentally changed the way the bass was used, was Gary Peacock, who passed away last week, and Scotty LaFaro. And I wanted you to talk about when you got hip to them.
Well, let's see. The actual year, I can't tell you. But I was in my 20s, so I'm, 82 now. So
were you aware of it? Were you aware of it when it was happening, or was it latent? Like, were you buying? Because I know Johnny said that records would take extra time to come down to New Orleans if that's where you grew up. But it just took. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that early '60s period, the Village Vanguard sessions, the Peacock's work on the West Coast. Were you even into that? I mean, if not, that's cool. I listen to that music and it's like, and Paul Motion and that stuff, like, I just wonder if that was what touched your heart during the time that it happened, or was it latent?
Well, sure. I mean, it was a matter of redefining the bass from Milt Hinton, who was wonderful, Ray Brown, wonderful, all
Slam Stewart,
innovators in their own way. Yeah. Great innovators. And but what Scotty did, and later on Gary Peacock followed along, I think it was just to play this very interactive role of the bass. And of course, drummers and piano players are instrumental in that. You can't, if you're going to play that way, you can't play against a piano player and a drummer. I'm talking about the rhythm section.
Absolutely.
Who plays different, has a different divergent view of how the feel should be. It's a matter of, I remember when I first really started doing it on a gig, I'd been listening a lot, but I was working with a great pianist by the name of Fred Crane, a great drummer, Jimmy Zatano. Jimmy had played with
Jimmy Zatano. This is in New Orleans?
Yeah. No, he was in New Orleans.
Oh, this is great. Oh, my God.
There's a whole story about Jimmy Zatano.
Oh, you can break it down whenever, at some point. But, I mean, so that's such a beautiful thing. It's like, because you're walking, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, I want to try to speak a little bit.
I had been listening to these people a lot.
Sure.
I've been listening to Scotty for a long time. I had been listening to, started listening to Gary Peacock. Also Andrew Stinson. I think his last name was Stinson.
Dude, it doesn't matter if it's Jim Keltner's.
Let me explain.
Go ahead.
Let me tell you the story.
Go ahead.
We can, So I was working a really great gig with Freddie Crane, and about a day after that, and I just started breaking up the time. I started playing more interactive, and Fred was open to it. And actually, the drummer on that at the time was Zatano wasn't on the gig yet. It was great drummer from the East Coast. We became very close.
Oh, that's great. Wait, I'm sorry.
Don Hesterberg. So
no, let me ask you you cut
anyway.
out. You cut out for a minute. What was the antecedent to that? You were shocked about something? I missed that.
My father died.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no. Well,
yeah, well, it was a long time, but no, it was like. So, can you talk about if, in retrospect, sonically and in terms of like constitutionally, like just in terms of fearlessness on the bandstand, what was that a demarcation point for Bill Huntington?
Yeah, it was a demarcation point as far as doing it on a gig. I've done it playing with different people, but not doing it on a gig.
Yeah, I love it. Dude, you just read my mind. I was like, because do you feel like, because ultimately, like that was in vogue, and then we got amplified, and things got louder and louder, even in the context of melodic improvisation. People call that jazz. But do you think that conversational style, how over time it changed with bass players? Because all of a sudden you had, by the mid-'70s, you had featured bass players. So you had Alphonso Johnson and Stanley Clarke, and the bass was being featured as a lead instrument. But this was just merely, you were a conduit between the bass and the drums of conversation. And I wonder if you feel like, how did we get farther away from that instead of closer to that? Because I've never heard more. Train was going to be modal in a couple of years, but that stuff, I put on an analog cassette of Village Vanguard. It sounds different every time I play it. I don't even know what's going on. It's so insane, man. And I'm like, why did we, was it because of amplification? Did the music get louder?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Jimmy Garrison, I heard Jimmy Garrison live with Train in New Orleans.
What, at Hayes' Chicken Shack?
No, it was a place called Vern's.
Oh, my.
And
Vern's?
They were all, Charlie Sue was with me, and we went 2 nights to hear Train. I think it was a huge room, almost like a big hall. And if I remember, I think both nights that they were there, I think there were about 10 people in the room.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Charlie Neville said.
And I remember sitting at the bar with Train and talking. And but the thing that Jimmy Garrison was, right down 4 on the floor player. He was out of the Ray Brown School. He wasn't playing interactive. He was, and Elvin, of course, was Elvin. So, but
were they? Hold on. Was that stuff though? Was that were his tunes in 4/4 time, or were they odd meter?
Yeah, he was playing some 6/8 type feels or 12/8. Later on, like Favorite Things and so on. But yeah, basically they were pretty straight ahead tunes.
Interesting.
And of course, he was working in New Orleans. He was probably thinking about that too. And
I'm sorry, what was that?
He was working in New Orleans.
Oh, New Orleans, yeah.
Probably considering that too. But
no, wait, hold on. I'm not from New Orleans. What do you mean by that?
The gig, yeah. After the gig, Elvin was packing his drums up, and and this was their last night on the gig, right? And Elvin was packing his drums up, and he distributed the cases down the aisle, the middle aisle of the club, and just hummed the drums into the cases like basketballs. And I remember that Train looked around after a couple of drums hit the floor and said, "Sometimes I think Elvin's losing his mind."
Dude, I can't. You just went to Never Never Land on me, dude. I mean, that's insane.
Well, just telling you.
Hold on. He was. How are you able to bounce? Wait, he was bouncing the drums?
Quite a bit of noise. So we were standing at the bar with Train, and we all looked around and see what was going on, what all the clattering was about.
I've heard this from Pat Martino and the late great Steve Grossman, the horn player. The thing about, John Coltrane You know, when I listen to that music, and I don't listen, I'm not a voracious train cat, but I mean, when I put on Love Supreme, it sounds like they're praying. You know, it's like prayer music,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and I just wonder. But you know, here's the point: is that what Grossman told me and Pat told me is that Train played without his teeth. He played with his gums
Yeah.
because
I
it
know.
was more comfortable for him. And here, Pat
Yeah.
Martino, a 17-year-old Italian cat from Philadelphia, growing up with Charlie Erlin, walking into the bathroom, and there's Train, his idol, taking out his teeth. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's like, what a mass. And then to hear the power and prayer coming out of him vibrationally is so magical and so sorely lacking. And it just, you were on the precipice of feel. And I kind of wanted you to talk about, like, ultimately, like, when you started to back that when you decided to start going out and after your dad passed and start being a conversationalist, when did you first, I mean, when you met Johnny, was that kind of like instant conversation? Did you guys lock in immediately?
When I met John Coltrane,
No, Vidakovich.
yeah, to a point we did. Remember, I had been coming up. I was older. I was a whole generation removed. So my background had been in traditional jazz, playing the banjo, and in swing and bebop. You know,
I love it. I
and
freaking love
I
Huntington,
was
dude.
listening.
Wait, did you hang
Yeah.
with him? Did you
So
did you hang with Mundell
Johnny,
Lowe? Did you hang with Mundell Lowe?
sure,
Can you talk
yeah,
about, because he went to
good
the
friend.
famous door. He was hanging with Huntington. Talk me about Mundell, dude.
The only thing I remember about Mundell is I worked with him at a couple of clubs, and he was the sweetest guy in the world, man. Great player and a very
You guys
sweet
are all
guy.
the sweetest guys in the world, man. I'm telling you.
Oh, he was.
You guys are, no,
He
your whole
was.
generation is, man.
No, I can tell you about some people who weren't, if you want to hear it.
Oh yeah, no. Believe me, people have said to me, you don't even want to hear the bad stuff. It would make you not even want to respect. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's, to me. When did you believe? I mean, were you committed to? Because there was tantalizing opportunity to be. I mean, obviously they were cutthroat kind of things, but still, a lot of jingle work on the coasts. You could have gone to Vegas and been in show bands, but you would say your legacy is a live New Orleans musician.
Uh, well, yeah. I mean,
And that is a
I,
badass
yeah.
compliment, by the way.
But I think, well, let me put it this
Yeah,
way. I
go ahead.
think if I have a legacy, it has to do with starting so early. I mean, I was 16 and playing professionally and recording. Well, I wasn't playing the bass, I was playing the banjo. And I was playing mostly with black musicians because that's what I wanted to do. So the legacy probably would have, I think that would be of more interest than what
I
I did
cannot
later on.
believe you're just dropping this knowledge. You were playing now at the time. Would you have opportunities to stretch with the banjo, or were you merely playing rhythm?
No, man, no.
I
I
mean,
just
I would
played.
love to hear you stretch out with
I
a banjo.
typical. I played the yeah. I played the typical banjo. I was just a
Dude,
kid.
this is
I was like
unreal, man.
13 or 14, and I was playing. In fact, in Charlie Sewer's book, about New Orleans, his experiences,
Yes.
there's a picture of me playing at my house with black musicians who were friends of mine, much older black musicians. There's a picture right in the book. I can't remember the page, but if you just thumb through the pictures,
What
you'll
was it?
see
So,
me.
what attracted you to that trad? I mean, they were doing some I don't know, the Famous Brothers. That might have been around your time, around that time. Like, what attracted you?
Well, no, I
Yeah,
mean there was all kinds of rhythm in New Orleans. It
I
was
know.
wonderful. I mean,
Talk
it was a
about it. Talk
wonderful
about
place for
talk
rhythm.
about the milieu
So,
of rhythm.
yeah, well, I mean, it was everywhere. What can you say?
I know.
I
It's
mean,
freaking awesome. It's
you'd
free.
walk
And
down
did
the
you?
street. You'd
Oh my
walk
god.
down the say we'd walk down the street in the corner, and there was a funeral, and you'd hear a second line band.
Wow.
And you know, I remember that the bass drum especially used to get me, the way the bass drummers played. The way they synchronized what they did, they had a little tiny cymbal on top of the drums, and they would go boom, 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 boom. And that afterbeat was this little cymbal, so it came out like boom, 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 boom. It was infectious, man. It was like beautiful. I remember that's one of my earliest memories from just a kid in puberty, you know.
You were basically rhythmically. They were adding an extra beat. They were adding an extra downbeat with the cymbals. Like that's
no, it was just an eighth. No, it was like one. I mean, it was 1, 2, 1 and 3. But they were adding that eighth note pickup
right
to each beat. Ba, boom, ba.
So it's fair to say that you saw second line drumming actually evolve in its time.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was more, you know, it was more about. I mean, there wasn't the studio kind of second line drumming that became popular.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Actually, Earl Palmer was the guy who brought it to the studios. I don't know if you know who Earl Palmer was.
Of course, dude. No, dude, of course he brought it to the studios. That guy was on the Chitlin circuit with Train and Sonny Rollins. All those guys played. That was what I wanted to ask you about. You know, to me, Sonny Rollins, Train, Earl Palmer, and the list goes on and on. Cannonball, those guys played R&B before they played bebop. And you could hear that the blues was right alongside that term of jazz, bebop jazz. It was really right there because those guys had been reared on the Chitlin circuits playing, you know, I have the names, I can't pull them out, but, you know, the bands that they were in. Were you on the Chitlin circuit at all?
No, I mean, I was in New Orleans. So, I mean, we were playing.
But you never went on the road with a gospel troupe or like, I mean, Earl Palmer was all,
No, never did it. No. I didn't know many New Orleans musicians who did. I'm sure there were plenty, but
they didn't have to because there was so much work, you know?
Yeah, there was a lot of work and there was a lot of rhythm, you know, right there in the city. I mean, I remember going to churches, you know. I can remember that.
Well, I want to read this to you. I want to read this to you and see if this because this is going. I want to see if this predates Huntington. This is from drummer Herschel Dwellingham. He said there was a band that originated in Bogalusa called the Rhythm Aces. They were very popular all across the South, Texas, all the way across to Florida. Some of the people who were in the band were Earl Palmer and Bobby Bryan. There were some great guys in that band. Lee Allen and Earl Palmer, just a couple of the guys, were protesting that the black union president was stealing money. He ejected them out of the union. Earl couldn't work in New Orleans, so he came to Bogalusa and started working with the Rhythm Aces. I mean, how great is that, dude? That dude was, would you say he was where does John Boudreaux fit in with Earl? I mean, was Earl the king of the town?
Yeah. Earl, I think, was the major. He, Ed Blackwell.
Yep. James Black, or was he too untrustworthy?
No, James Black wasn't around yet.
Oh,
we're talking
Blackwell. Holy! Did you play with Blackwell? Did you play with Blackwell?
I never got a chance.
Oh man!
But I never got a chance. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, that would have been quite.
Okay, so Earl Palmer, Blackwell. Who else? What kind of soul or R&B outfits wound up in there? Earl King.
Yeah, and also Professor Long. Go listen to him. He had a great guitar player, by the way, by the name of Roy Montrell.
How do you spell that last name?
Montre. Influential guitar player, jazz guitar player. And I remember him telling me, he was playing with Fats Domino. And I remember him telling me man, I am so tired of doubling those bass parts. You
Yeah.
know,
Wow.
bum,
Wow.
da-da-dum, 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 that kind of thing. You know, bum, boom, bum, ba-dum, because that's basically what the guitar did in Fats's band. And he said, man, I'm so tired of that. And I could dig it because he was a great jazz player. You know, he needed to be able to stretch.
Well, I mean, it's important to stretch and actually have something to say and not repeat phrases and things like that. Did you go to Hayes's Chicken Shack?
I can't remember that. No, I'm not
Because I
sure.
mean
Bunch
that
of different
Deacon
places.
John went there.
Mm.
Charlie Neville told me that the Deacon went there, and Elvin was nailing a nail into the floor to keep his bass drum from moving around. You know, they were tying
Yeah, a
ropes
lot
to
of
things.
guys.
I mean, how great? Who was tying? Who were tying? Who was the first rope tire that you worked with? You know, I mean, those guys were tying because I mean, that was the time of like painting and you know rebound, accent, Max Roach. Like, who was the first? Who was? What was? Talk about this. What was it? Zavino? What was this cat's name? You want to talk about that story?
I'm not sure of that name.
No,
No, I can't tell you.
the drummer that we were talking about. You're like, I have a story about Johnny something, Johnny Vivino maybe, or anyway.
Mm, mm. I don't know.
Who was the first? Who was the first cat um, that you felt because of the fact that music was latent getting to New Orleans, you would get records often 2 or 3 months later than the East Coast and the West Coast. Did you feel like there was a point where you um, were creating new musical vocabulary on the bandstand? And if so, who was it with?
Oh yeah, I mean in New Orleans, sure. I mean the thing was that yeah, I mean as far as getting records, that was a problem. But there were radio shows like on WWOZ. Larry McKinley had a great show where he would play, you know, what was going on. So you'd hear the latest releases by people like Train, Sonny Rollins, uh, you know, the Breakers, and he was going to play that music, man. He had a jazz radio show every day. So that was one way. I mean, through the radio.
What about the Plug Nickel sessions? That was arguably the first time there was a blood oath made between Tony, Ron, and Tony, Ron, and the guys in the band. They were bored to death of bebop playing standards, and they said, you know, listen, we're gonna, you know, they had been playing off on the side. They said, you know, we're going to
I
Herbie.
think that had to do with Miles, right?
Well, no, but this is a
Well,
great story. So Herbie,
oh,
Wayne, these guys were like, listen, you know, we're going to stick with the game. You know, we're going to we're going to play a standard, but then we're going to leave the head of the tune, and we're going to stick with the plan. They took a blood oath, and they went to Miles, and that night in Chicago or wherever, Plug Nickel, he's like, yo, we're recording tonight, and they're like, no, oh my God, we're going to still do it. We're going to still do it, and they did it,
mhm,
and that was
mhm,
and Miles dug it, and Miles dug it. So,
mhm,
where were you
yeah.
at when that conversation was going on, like breaking up time and form? Who was that with, and how did you explore that and integrate the New Orleans rhythms?
Well, that's a good question, but New Orleans feel is the basic catalyst, rhythm catalyst. So you've always got that feel. I mean, look, when I started playing like in that sort of style,
Mm-hmm.
I was still thinking about playing 4/4 on the banjo. You did?
This is I,
So I was
well, no,
thinking,
no.
or
Explain that. No, break it down. No, because I'm.
listening to the great slap bass players
Oh yeah.
that I played with, like Chester Zardes, for instance, and you know, and Flo Dry, who played with George Lewis, fitting in with the George Lewis band when I was about 13, 14.
No
Sitting there
way.
hearing
No
that
way.
power, that power
Lewis.
coming at me, man. That power, absolute rhythmic power,
Blowing
man.
people away. Acoustic, unamplified power.
Oh, sure,
Soul
sure.
power. Soul power.
And the drummer was George Lewis. George Lewis, a lot of people don't know this. George Lewis was listening not just to Johnny Dodds and Edmund Hall and the more traditional people, but he was listening to people like Woody Herman,
Right.
Benny Goodman. He admired them. So when he got on the bandstand, he didn't want the drummer to just play a press roll. He wanted the drummer to play on the ride cymbal. So that, and along with drag, playing the way he played, and the banjo, my banjo teacher was a great banjo player by the name of Lawrence Marrero, who's on those Bunk Johnson records. I don't know if you've heard any of those things. And a lot of
I would love to. Please hit me to that stuff immediately.
Well, that's it. Check out Bunk Johnson records made in New Orleans are made with George Lewis, and you'll hear Lawrence. You'll hear drag. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of
who is the? Yeah, no, we're cool. I mean, Chuck.
All I'm telling you, there was look. This is what I'm trying to tell you. The rhythm section. Later on, when I met young traditionalists, who many of them came from out of town, and they were excellent musicians, and they really were in love with the idea of playing in New Orleans and playing the music, but they had a stilted view of the music, of the rhythm, and they. And how can I explain it? The Lewis rhythm section had buoyancy.
Who was on bass? Who was on bass?
Slow drag.
I'm sorry, slow drag?
Pavajo. Wait. His real name was Alcide, Alcide, Pavajo. He was Indian and African and French.
He's a Mardi Gras. Oh, my God.
He was a great, sweet, well, he was.
He was like an Oscar Pettiford of New Orleans. Yeah, this is unbelievable.
Well, no.
No, I mean, like with the Native American Well, I mean, there are different Native American. Pettiford just seen, and then like Jim Pepper was also there. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. Yeah. I guess so. I guess you could say that. Yeah. Anyway,
that's just the way I hear it. Yeah.
So when I went to, there was a place called Manny's Tavern, which was a little.
Where was it?
Manny's Tavern.
No, where was it though? What, like, was in front in the quarter?
No, this is all in New Orleans. Manny's Tavern was in a working class neighborhood in a nice part, and the Lewis band was working there. And I had heard this music on record, and I'd heard it on the radio, and occasionally when my family and I were downtown doing something, I'd hear bands watching. And so I knew about the music, and my sister, who was a real promoter of the music, she worked at a record store, and she brought home the Bunk Johnson Victor records for me, and I was immediately hooked. I was about 12 years old, and I was immediately hooked by the rhythm. I said, man, and my dad was a classical violinist. My mom played the piano. My sister played the piano and sang opera, not professionally, but that was their thing. So I had this background of classical music, but when I heard this music, I said, man, I've got to really check this out more, and that was the turning point for me as far as jazz went.
Did you? No, this is. I mean, talking to Bill Huntington here, just blowing my mind right now. Were you hip to Otto Fink?
I know the name.
Yeah, well, he taught at Grunwald, and there were a couple. I mean, did you actually? I mean, I guess here's the point. Like, we were talking about it last night a little bit, but you learned internal time feel through the banjo on the bandstand with your elders, and you really didn't come from the academy, and you developed your own individual sound. If there was anything aside from rudiments and practice, discipline, what did you take from any academic learning into your career that proved useful?
Well, I kind of evolved the way a musician often evolves. I looked at first of all, I was really closely involved with traditional music, and then I began to listen to swing, great swing players. And then, bebop came. I remember the first time I heard Bud Powell, I was frightened to death.
Right.
It was like the first time I heard John Coltrane.
Right.
I was stunned, live, I mean. And but some friends who were into jazz deeply, one was a very good clarinet player, they brought a record with Bud Powell. And I was sitting there listening to that. We want you to hear something, Bill. I said, okay. And they put this on, and I reacted hostilely to it, naturally. I had the reaction that a lot of people who were raised around trad or didn't, or grew up playing it, felt like it was, anything new, avant-garde, is going to, like, stun people to a point. It's going to be, that's the whole point. It's creative and it's different. So when I heard that, I said, man, this is what is this? And I denied its impact. I felt like, well, gee. And later on, I became a fanatic on Bud Powell. I mean, a fanatic.
Yeah, you basically are channeling. I did a couple of interviews with Steve Swallow, and he said the same thing about Ornette. He was abhorred by it and couldn't listen to it. Mm-hmm. And then over time came to recognize the genius. I think what's interesting is, the idea that so many of these cats I remember I've interviewed Mike Nock, Miroslav Vitchuas, Jan Hammer, Hugh Masekela, rest in peace. So many immigrants that came to this country, but the white cats, the European white cats that came here in New York, were always treated and respected and trusted by the black musicians. This was around the time of monetization, jazz becoming jazz, so to speak, but realizing that there could be a monetary component. The African cats, the black cats in Harlem, they didn't have any trepidation, or they didn't believe there was any motive from the Australians and the European cats, because they just loved the music, and they were afraid of the white co-opting of the music. And I know it was different in New Orleans, and do you think there was a color bar in New Orleans, or is that what makes New Orleans unique from the rest of the country?
Well, coming up, I played mostly with black musicians when I was younger. So
how did that happen? How did that happen? How did that happen?
I wanted it to happen.
Well, tell the story of how you made it happen.
Well, I can tell you one story.
Yeah, go ahead.
In fact, there was a photo of it. There's a photo of it, Charlie Sewer's book. With that band,
dude, this Seward book, man. I love Charlie Sewer, man.
Well, if you open the book to that page, I don't know if you have the book, you'll see a picture of me playing in my house.
Well, give us a visual. Give us a mental picture.
With all black musicians. Okay? Now, in the meantime, my parents were downstairs. Now, this is not a very wealthy neighborhood. This is more or less a white suburb of the city called Lakeview, which we had moved out because my mom, especially, wanted me to have more of a suburban neighborhood to grow up in.
A safer place. Safe.
We had been living in let me finish.
Yeah.
We had been living in the inner city.
Oh.
And my mom didn't want me to grow up in that. She felt like, so we moved out and got an apartment, an upstairs apartment in this old house. And that was actually, it's been torn down. That's how ramshackle it was. But it was in Lakeview, in this nice suburb, right? in this white neighborhood. And in the meantime, I'd also been studying banjo with George Lewis's banjo player, Lawrence
Dude, you're like
Guerrero,
a New
who was
Orleans
black.
version of Eric Weisberg.
I don't know that name.
You don't? Are you? Wait, no, dueling banjos. Go ahead. I was just
Yeah.
joking. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, it's
Yeah.
a whole different. It's a different approach to the banjo.
Sure,
man.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
It's rhythm. It's rhythm.
No,
Yeah.
and it's so
It's
great
like
because you had multiple, like the Basie band, but it was New Orleans style. You had 4 rhythm instruments: piano, bass, banjo,
yeah.
drums. Right?
I'm glad you mentioned the Basie band because the way Lawrence, my teacher, played, he used to mute on the banjo, and the feeling he got was like Freddie Green.
That's
with the
unreal.
Basie
I
band.
knew it. I knew it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
I
didn't
knew
get this clank sound.
Right. Ah.
He got more of a plunky sound and more sustained.
Just the foundation was so strong, man.
The foundation was very strong, and that was one of the things that hooked me on the rhythm section with George Lewis, was the fact that that rhythm section had so much buoyancy. It wasn't clanky, and it wasn't like bam, 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 bam. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, they weren't pounding the rhythm into the ground. They were lifting it up.
Yeah, that's right. It was pounding, but it wasn't.
No, exactly, but it was buoyant. It was buoyant. Yeah.
It's hard to explain. Yeah.
But it's funny because younger cats have had digital beats, quantized rhythm crunched into their ears for decades. They can't feel that. They can't feel that. That's a problem.
Well, I mean, yeah. But they didn't. Most of the young cats I talked to didn't like the Lewis band. They felt like it was sort of impure because George had been listening to people like Audie Shaw and so on, and
it was impure because he was listening to white cats?
No, I'm talking about black cats. You don't know who George Lewis was, do you? He was a great black clarinetist.
Sure.
He played with Funk Johnson. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's who I'm talking about. And that's the band I went to sit in.
But I mean, what was impure? What was
Funk.
impure? What do these cats say is impure about him?
Because the banjo didn't go clank, clank, clank.
I see.
He has more of a strumming sound.
I see.
And the drummer played on the ride cymbal. All right? So you had this strum like this. It almost sounded like the Basie rhythm section. I mean, if you listen to those records, you'll hear what I mean. It's not the typical traditional sound, not the, I mean, the early things like Hot Five, those are great records, and Bix, those things are great. But there wasn't that clank that you got from the young traditionalists. I remember there was a band called the Firehouse Five.
Sure.
Out on the West Coast. Yeah. Okay, well, they got that clanky sound a bit. It was kind of like, it was carnival music kind of to me,
Yes.
It didn't have the effect. That's all. It didn't have the conviction. It didn't have the darkness.
I want
what
to
can I say?
No, this is really, a compadre of yours that's still cooking the groove. I mean, I hope he's still cooking the groove. He's definitely still with us. Is Chuck Beatty. He said,
Beautiful.
I knew the owner of Hayes' Chicken Shack real well. I met Coltrane when he brought his group there in '63. White people could go to the black clubs, but we couldn't go to their clubs. This white couple came into the club, and they went up and asked for Elvin's autograph. And Elvin said, I'm not giving any fucking autographs. I was bummed out by that. So, I mean, Elvin, let's go back to, I mean, like, those... Garrison, I mean, these guys were really living, in some ways, I mean, it was a non-glamorous lifestyle, so that's why there was a survivalist element and a spiritual prayer element to the music. Did you feel at a certain point like you gravitated to African American music because of the fearless pulse, tension, and release, and somewhat, just totally in the moment spontaneity, as opposed to sort of the more classicalized, European taking cues from a conductor, sort of perfection, as opposed to just cooking with grease.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was the thing that gravitated me was the feeling. You know, I just related right away to the way the black musicians played for the most part. Not that there weren't some great white musicians,
Absolutely.
but by and large, the musicians that knocked me out were the black musicians, the guys I wanted to be around, the guys I wanted to eventually play with.
John Boudreaux.
I never did get. I believe it was John. Yeah.
Who were some of the cats? I mean, was it I got a name here that I'm looking at. Ed Frank.
He's a great piano player.
Right. I mean, who?
Ted.
So who were some of these cats besides Lewis? Who were some of the guys you loved that you got to play with from the African American community?
Well, Earl Palmer.
Explain. I need to know when you played with Earl Palmer. This is unbelievable.
I can't even remember, man.
No, come on. So you know it happened, but you just have no real heart.
No, I remember playing with him. In fact, later on, I made a record with him with
you did?
Rabbinac. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was it? Who was it with? Who was it with?
This, Dad, and the Other.
Wait, I'm sorry. Who's the leader?
What? The name of the record is This, Dad, and the Other. It's a Mac Rabbinac record.
You knew Dr. John Mac Rabbinac?
Oh, sure, man. John, he was like, I gave him a guitar lesson one day.
Yeah, I feel like you were his elder, man.
You got to understand how old I am.
No.
I preceded Mac. Hey, wait. I preceded Mac.
Absolutely.
I preceded
him
by almost a decade. Okay. So I was involved long before he was. You know, yeah, his dad was works on jukeboxes. So yeah, and that's great. I mean, he was totally involved in the music and produced it, and was great. But I was involved. First of all, I wasn't involved in the R&B side. I was more involved in 4/4 in traditional music and swing. The way the guys. That's what attracted me. Later on, I would go out and play with them in those same grooves. But you got to remember, man, of my generation, black and white musicians who were into modern jazz weren't too crazy about playing those grooves. We did it, but it wasn't like that's what we lived for. You dig? What we lived for was the swing. I know that's hard to understand in New Orleans, but that was what it was all about.
Why is it hard to? You mean because you just are so because that?
Because the common thing, and the word on the street is, okay, everybody wanted to play second line field, and that's not really true, man. That isn't true of Earl. Earl, for instance, said we all wanted to play bebop. Okay, now that's coming from a master and a person who preceded so many of the other drummers and taught them. So, I mean, we all wanted to play bebop.
Were you ever connected to Melvin Lasty?
I knew Melvin, but
can you talk about him because his spiritual church? I remember Cyril Neville telling me that he would go as a boy, and his parents would take him to the Catholic church, and they'd speak in Latin. He's like, I don't know what the hell they're saying, and so he went over to Lasty's church where the holy rollers were falling out of the pews. He just he wouldn't go in. He'd get off on the vibration,
Yeah, sanctified church has a lot to do with it.
What I'm saying is, did you get exposure? Did you get exposure to the sanctified church?
A few times. I mean, it wasn't. Can
you talk about that?
I was more into like playing jazz.
No, I know you were, but I mean, what can you talk about a memory from the sanctified church? I know you weren't ensconced in it, but what is a memory of it?
Yeah, I remember the rhythm basically, and the sound of the voices, beautiful sound, spiritual sound that people got when they were wailing those things, man.
Did you, obviously, I mean, you were into you wanted to swing, but Big Chief Tootie Montana, that's your generation. Did you know those Mardi Gras Indians?
No, those guys. I mean, that whole thing came.
How
He
is it
was
that
so
New
young.
Orleans? How is it that you were never? It's still so. It really was a segregated. Musically, it was a segregated city.
Not that much. Not if you went out and did it like I did.
I know.
You
I know.
it wasn't
You're an
that segregated.
outlier, though.
But
You're an outlier.
we're talking about an era and a style.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I preceded the big second line push.
Absolutely.
Okay, the second line came along, but I preceded that.
I know you did.
Understand that, man. I'm not,
No, I did. And I think it's so intoxicating. It's
the music. Yeah, it was biracial. It had nothing to do with race, but the music was swing.
What did Earl mean? What did Earl mean? We just want to play bebop. What did that mean to you?
He meant what it meant was what he said. We all wanted to play bebop. What does that mean?
I don't know. Well, I'm just saying.
We wanted to play in that style.
In that style. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, look. Ellis Marcella, as far as I know, never made a second line record. Do you know of any?
Dude, the guy was burning his face off with John Pierce and freaking, Charlie Hayden's brother, man. Freaking unreal dude, man. Ellis Marsalis.
Yeah.
No, it was always burning bop, post bop, whatever, but no second line, no.
No, I never.
But I don't mean that's fine. I mean,
we all went out and played commercial gigs to where we played second line beats, but it wasn't what we did as a preference. What we all wanted to do was swing. My generation, that all came along later on with people like Mac and so on. That generation and Johnny. Okay, cool. That's totally cool. It's wonderful, great feeling, danceable, all those things. But you got to remember that my generation was more into bebop. We were into more into swinging.
Well, I want you to talk about Harold Jones, Basie's drummer. I've interviewed him a couple times, and Tony Bennett's drummer. He said that he'd be playing with these organ trios in Chicago, and the drums would get no amplification. And so you had to generate volume acoustically and physically. That's what separates the point. Here's the thing: the rhythms that Mac was just layering on to the rhythms that had been preceding. They were plugged in. Can you talk about your philosophy as to how to increase sonic expansion through soul and physicality?
My God.
Dig the JFS?
It's you project. I think if you love and have experimented the music, experienced it in depth, I think you project it. That's the way I think. That's the way I feel about it. I don't know about all these other, attributes. But if you
you didn't have refrigerator-sized amplifiers. Some of the PA systems were a train wreck. Al Jackson told Duck Dunn, just look like you know what you're doing, because all you got to do is really turn on the first couple of rows, because nobody in the back can hear you.
No, we had to get sound. I mean, I played for
How
years.
did you generate sound through spirit?
Well, there are lots of ways to get sound on the bass, to get good sound. First of all, you've got to balance the pressure of the right hand, the pull of the right hand on the strings, with the pressure of the left hand. You just can't plunk away at the strings. Not in bebop. Like in traditional music, it's more about that percussiveness. But in bebop, it was more about getting a legato sound and getting those lines out so that it could be heard, and getting your time out so it could be heard, as far as like playing quarter notes. So what I can tell you, man.
Well, no,
Lou
was there a
Banton
point
is
Putter
basically
Smith? Yeah, Putter Smith
is
said
playing
that.
with great swing players in New Orleans. People who play in a swing style.
But did you feel? Did you drop the purist approach after a while, and because you had to sing for your supper?
Approach like about
Well, I'm saying like Putter
about
Smith. Putter Smith, the
playing.
great bass player. He ran down for a gig with Woody Herman in the mid '70s, and he comes down there with his upright. He trucked it down there, and Woody's like, "Why the fuck did you bring that thing? Where's the electric?" And so, it's like I just, it's not about compromise. It's just there's a snobism as it relates. I mean, Don Patterson would just work you to death. Sonny Stitt would work you to death. That stuff was hard bop. But I just did you wind up playing funk? And I mean, there was no word for funk in the lexicon when Huntington was strumming the
Sure.
Joe.
I played electric bass. For years, for at least 10 years, without even other than practicing.
Were you? So you probably had a lot of funk. You had a lot of funk, I bet.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
damn!
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah,
are there any albums you can point to that you were?
Of New Orleans funk, and I loved it. Look, hey, I don't want to get. I'm not demeaning playing New Orleans funk. All right, I'm just telling you what the players of my generation preferred to do. That's all.
What about Prince Lala?
Mm-hmm. No, I don't know him.
Yeah, he was.
Sorry.
Well, no.
I know the name.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to get to the idea of like pre-Playboy Club. What was your first steady gig? What club? I mean, it was the Absinthe Bar at that point. It's the famous Door. What was your first gig?
The first gig I had, steady gig, I think was.
I know we're stretching out here.
Man, I mean,
yeah, we're stretching out. I mean, you're doing a great job. You're sharp. You're sharp as get out, man.
Yeah, it went long. I mean, it goes way back before the Playboy Club.
I know.
And there were very few steady gigs unless you play with one of those Dixieland bands on Bourbon Street, for the tourists.
Just guys that were just wanking it, yeah, for the tourists, yeah.
Yeah, right. Some of those were very good musicians, man, but it wasn't.
No, I did. It was yeah. You were just yeah. It was just whatever, yeah.
I was more of a renegade, and and they didn't want to hire me anyway. I was in the bebop by that time. So
what's your first gig though? First steady bandstand upright, or did you play tub bass ever?
Yeah.
You played tub? You played tub?
Yeah, I did that.
Dude, please. Wait, what? You had there must have been some like crazy folk musicians.
No, not on a gig, but like it was like a fooling around, man. I had a tub bass.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I would love to see Huntington trekking that tub bass around town, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, my background is pretty. I don't have an academic background.
I know you're New Orleans cat.
Remember this?
I know.
Well, whatever, yeah, but.
But I'm saying when I say New Orleans cat, I mean like there was so much music, all genres. You were just ensconced in it and just marinating in it. You were cooking the gumbo all the time. You didn't need that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, let's just say like tomorrow, everything changed and the virus went away and all of a sudden the government was funding the arts and all these independent music venues were opening up. Would you support investment in the academy, or would you support investment of like the ability to create communes for musicians to become bands? There are no bands anymore. Like especially in the vernacular that we love, right? The Blakey, the Jazz Messengers, the Miles, the Woodies, the Dizzies. Those were minor league. Those cats. It was like the farm system, and then eventually they go off and become. And part of it's the record industry. But what would if tomorrow the field cleared and the budget was booming for avant-garde arts? Where should the money actually go?
Well, I mean, the whole idea of academy schooling is great. I mean, it gave, first of all, it gave employment to a lot of players who couldn't find work. At least in New Orleans. Right. I mean, Loyola and UNO started the jazz department because of Charles Blanc, and then Ellis came in and was chairman. Uh, and that's marvelous, man. I'm not going to put that down, but that's not the way I learned. And I taught at these schools. I developed these exercises because I was on the bandstand and realized I need to get this together.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to do this. For instance, on the bass, I realized if I wanted to solo like I'd soloed on the guitar, see, I'd been a jazz guitar player before I even took up the bass.
So in between the banjo and the bass, you were playing jazz guitar?
18.
You were playing
Yeah,
jazz?
banjo, and I went to guitar.
You went from
and played
banjo to
bebop
jazz guitar?
because the guitar was
Holy,
more applicable.
it's like Gene
to bebop.
Bertoncini kind of stuff.
Well, I don't know about Gene, but I mean,
Who were you getting off on? Who were you getting off on? Tal Farlow?
Hmm?
Who were you getting off on? Tal
sorry,
Farlow?
what?
Who were you getting off on? Tal Farlow?
Oh yeah, Jimmy Rainey, Tal Farlow, Wes. Of course, I mean, even Wes was kind of really. Charlie Christian was a big influence on me.
I dig.
So
Thanks for
anyway,
bringing
I
that
was
up.
a guitar player first. Yeah, I was a guitar player first. So when I went to the bass, it was by default. All right? I took up the bass because I needed to work. So, and it was much easier to get work on the bass than it was on the guitar, unless I wanted to just play with R&B groups for the rest of my life. So when I took up the bass, I realized, gee, I can't play up here. I can't do this. So I developed a whole system of exercises and things I needed to do to play in various positions on the bass, to take solos, the kind of solos or play the kind of bass lines I wanted to do, and still get sound and still get a pulse, because that was always very important to me. So, that's kind of where it's at. That's where it was at. I mean,
Were you in a rhythm section as a jazz guitarist for cats from out of town that would come down?
Rhythm section, and also
like you'd fill in, like if Randy couldn't make the trip, you'd play with Stan Guest. You play with any of those cats?
I never got to do that. Man, you got to remember that New Orleans was pretty much off the circuit,
Off the grid.
and yeah, it was off the grid, man. We had our own.
Huntington was ruling the roost, dude. It's unreal, man. Unreal.
Right. It's unfortunate because I think that a lot of us missed out on.
No, I think it happened just the way it should have happened. Actually, it's perfect. It sucks.
It happened. It
happened.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm trying to get back. Like, did you recognize? I mean, we are living through. I started my show 10 years ago, and one of my first interviews, and I did 2 of them with him, was Richard Davis. And, we're living through this incredibly insane time where the color of the country is changing. There's a lot of people there's upheaval, there's chaos, the environment's in chaos. I just trying to go back to this idea of, like, you grew up in the inner city, but why did you attach yourself to the music of what would you say to people about music as it relates to breaking down any color bar? Because once you play, it's irrelevant what your skin color is. You're just making love on the bandstand.
Well, it should be. Unfortunately, it often isn't.
Why is that?
Well, because human nature is human nature, right?
Human nature.
Well, people just tend to be tribal.
Tribal. Yeah,
so they tend to, and it's, I mean, you got to remember, man, that what I was doing was just so rebellious and so out for a young white kid.
You were way out, man. No, but that's when I mean you were the antecedent in the 50s to the civil rights movement in the next 60s.
Exactly.
So I mean,
you really was.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'm asking for some sort of wisdom for younger cats who are going to listen to this long after we're gone about how to push the envelope and be edgy, stay within the law, and push for equal rights through music?
That's a good question, but I don't know. Everything, I mean, eras change, you know, like you were talking about things that are happening with the environment and so on. And these things change.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any reverse racism towards me, that I wasn't going to acknowledge it, okay? That I was just going to love the people I loved and be involved in the music I love.
That's the most beautiful thing you've said in the last 62 minutes, and I think, I mean, let's do part two. We're just getting started here, Huntington. That I just had a ball, man. It was great to hang with you.
I'm glad, man. Yeah, it's a little bit disconcerting.
No,
But,
no,
yeah.
this was a jam session, right? I mean, you're all about this stuff, man. You are pushing the envelope. The Jake Feinberg Show has been pushing the envelope, and I need your support and your energy, and I appreciate you going there with me today.
Well, I'm happy, man. I'm glad. I appreciate your interest, man. It's great.
We'll do it again, and I'll. Are you getting my texts? I'll send you a copy. Send me a photo of you so I can put up because it's going to go up on Spotify. So we'll blow this way out.
Okay, man.
Yeah,
All right.
be cool.
I'll do it.
Be cool, man.
All right, you too.
Yeah, cheers.
Take care.
Later, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, man.
Bye, man. That's why I do my show. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We will see you tomorrow.